Hi, this is Sudhin Bharti, and we are here at Open Networking Summit in Antwerp in Belgium. And today we have with us Jason Sepper. You are CTO of IoT and Edge at Dell Technologies. First of all, thanks for being on the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
And today we are going to talk about EdgeX Foundry. I think the project originated at Dell, and then it was contributed to Linux Foundation.
Yeah, we started it within Dell. It was called Project Fuse at the time, July of 15. Initially, it's like, what's the right architecture for IoT and edge computing? And realized pretty quick, what we really want to be doing is extending cloud-native principles as close as possible to the device edge, so that we can accommodate more flexibility in how solutions are brought together, microservice-based architectures, platform independence, that kind of stuff. But quickly realized if we don't make it very open, vendor neutral and open, and through the Linux Foundation is the route we took, we wouldn't be able to get to that kind of interoperability factor that we need, at the IoT edge. So yeah, started within Dell, and then we seeded it in April 17, a couple of years ago.
Right. Back in 2015, a lot of technology that we talk about, they were not even there.
Yeah.
So as new technologies keep popping up, how is the EdgeX Foundry evolving, or is still the same project? Can you just talk about the evolution of the project?
The trajectory. So basically, like I said, we very quickly realized we need cloud native at the edge. This notion of platform independent, loosely coupled microservices, polyglot. You can write, different code bases bound together through an API set. Can't just plop Cloud Foundry down on a Arduino board. So you need to kind of use those principles, but then re-architect it a bit. When we originally did the code, and so if someone's seen it, when we dropped it in April of 17, and for that first few releases, it was all Java. It was kind of prototype code with a very, very well architected base for this interoperability between devices and apps. So the technologies since then, we've completely changed everything out with from Java to Golang. So Golang is kind of like the primary code base in the project. That's reduced the footprint from it was huge, 2.5 gigs of memory footprint when we launched it. Now it's 50 megs, and that's with all the Docker, with the containerized and all that. So big changes in terms of the technologies used. We've made things even more swappable, where you can have database swappability, plug in your choice of analytics. But fundamentally, EdgeX is all about how can I take devices, any number of protocols, crazy number of protocols in the operations world, thousands of different ones, not just IP-based, but wireless mesh and different serial-based technologies and CAN bus and proprietary XYZ. How do I take all of those protocols and write device inputs in a common format to a common bus, and then whatever protocol I want on the top, done in a whatever fashion I want. So there's kind of like a universal translator in the middle. And the premise is that if we get enough folks that to matter on a common middle bus, I don't need to have one standard to rule the world for protocol. It will never happen. You're always going to have different protocols out there for communications. You'll always have different hardware choices, OS choices, ways of deploying containers, whether it's Kubernetes or some of the new stuff, like with K3S and all that, or any number of other choices. IoT, the edge, is inherently fragmented, and so you need these frameworks to kind of bridge this stuff together. So, there's a lot of technologies. We're hearing more and more about AI and more about all the ledger technologies and blockchains of the world, and this is why you need these loosely coupled frameworks, because the technology will always change, but if you have the right frameworks, you can bind it together in any combination over time. So you can kind of evolve as the technologies evolve.
Right, and if you look at edge computing, you also mentioned you have to get it ready for cloud native. How would you define cloud native in the context of edge?
Yeah, so it's a cloud native fundamentally. First off, cloud native is more about the principles, less about where it's run. So principles, loosely coupled, platform independent, microservice architecture. It's this notion of continuous delivery, how you deliver software, modern DevOps, all of that stuff. And so again, it's not where it's run, it's how you do it. And by extending these principles towards the edge, now if you're in the operations world, the OT world, so to speak, you're like, I don't want to update anything. I want, if my process is running, it's been running for 20 years, don't even touch it. You can drag me with my fingernails in the concrete away from Windows 95 or whatever it is. But in the modern world, it's all about, of course, the continuous delivery of software. Your pace of innovation is your competitive advantage. And so the more that we can move these types of principles closer to the physical world, where we're going to need to see more compute by the nature of just the sheer amount of data online, done in an open way, where I have kind of interoperability. I'm not reinventing the middle so many times. There's hundreds of IoT platforms right now that are just, the value is not having hundreds of platforms. The value is like consistent infrastructure with domain knowledge applied and specialty applications. So it's the cloud native principles extending the edge, important for that flexibility. Even if you're not going to be doing continuous delivery right now, if you're an operations person and you just want your process to run, it freaks you out when you talk to people in the operations world. It freaks them out if you say continuous delivery of software. They're like, don't even touch it. You need to prepare now, because in the future you're going to have to do it to keep up with your competition. And so architect it in now, even if you're kind of doing your traditional models. Use these open APIs so you don't have to reinvent. You can be more part of a broader ecosystem. And then it's just focus on the pace of innovation and focus on the value.
Also, when you talk about CD part, I'm sure that you're talking about enterprise IoT or industrial IoT, not the consumer IoT, right?
It really
doesn't
is,
matter.
it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
I mean, there's certain differences in terms of the use cases, some tools, but otherwise the foundational principles are the same.
Right. So another reason for this, for embracing that kind of model is also that if you look at the traditional IoT, you sell the device and you're done with it.
Right.
Nowadays, everything is service-based. So you have to maintain that device for 10 or 50 years.
And yes, maintain the device and the services on top. So one of the things, I do a lot of blogs, and like one of the things I talk about, the new product mindset out there is it's the value of an offer, a product or a service or whatever. It's not the day you ship it. It's the lifetime of that product. So software-defining experiences is key. Software-defining experiences, even hardware-defining experiences, where I send you digitally new hardware and you print it at home, and additive manufacturing, whatever. And then the other big thing is that if you want to get to the true Internet of Things or whatever, just call it whatever, you have to have interoperability across all of these different systems. All of it's interconnected. Home, retailers, energy, insurance, healthcare providers coming to the home, then they go into a business, and then things span into auto. Everything has to be interconnected. And so within EdgeX, it's kind of that foundational device to application interoperability, at the application layer. And then the LF Edge umbrella, that we're working on now, and we've rolled EdgeX since the launch. It grew quickly. We're now at 1.0 with EdgeX, and it's kind of commercial ready in that regard. EdgeX is a mature project that's getting really good adoption, and it's now moved under the LF Edge umbrella, where we're working with Akrano and Home Edge and Project Eve, and there's some new ones, Fledge, which is another alternative for data ingestion that we're kind of working on. How does it all work together? Beetle, which is Baidu's open edge cloud solution. The net is, how do we standardize as a broader industry on just enough plumbing and common APIs at both the infrastructure plane and the application plane. So EdgeX's application plane, Akrano and others are in infrastructure plane, to where I'm not reinventing the middle. I'm focusing on all the value and applying domain knowledge, but then also that interoperability across systems, whether it's a service provider or otherwise, starts to enable you to interconnect all these systems. And so there's some new things coming that we're working on that will kind of roll out soon, of how do I build trust across all these systems. So this is what it's about. I mean, new markets are always, everybody comes out swinging, trying to lock everybody in. They think, if I can lock you in, I can sell your data if you let me. The reality is you have to set the data free the moment it's created and use technology to bring checks back from strangers. This is how it'll work.
If you look at LF Edge, there are like so many projects within there. So are there any cases where, two projects are, either competing? How do you...
Yeah, I mean, it's the community, yes. So there's some overlap between projects, and there's always going to be, but it's better, the philosophy behind LF Edge, or really any of the umbrella projects, it's the community always votes. You bring things in, you win based on merit, meritocracy, and even in terms of how you think contributions are made. There's inevitably some overlap, but it's better to bring them together under, so there's a technical advisory committee that runs. We got the board. I'm on the board for LF Edge with a bunch of colleagues, and then there's this technical advisory committee. And so we have a process where we bring projects in. There's different stages of maturity, so that that you can kind of get. We want to be an inclusive community, and you can bring projects in, go through the review process, And then as you prove yourself that you're building a community, you're kind of meeting the goal, which is to harmonize across these projects over time, even if up front there's a little overlap. This is the goal. This is why you want to get stuff together. And then, of course, we've got bridges to other efforts. Actually, just yesterday was announced a link to an, or I guess it was today, associate membership with IOTA, one of the ledger efforts out there, kind of distributed ledger efforts, blockchain, whatever. Automotive Edge Computing Consortium, Industrial Internet Consortium. Like, so it's not just the projects within. Like, how do we go collaborate with other important industry efforts? Because this is about, let's get together and just figure out the bare minimum so we can interoperate, and then you go make your money. I always say, do you think, I'm Dell, like, would we sell a PC like, literally every second of the day if it costs $1,000 to connect your keyboard? The value is in the data. The value is kind of north side. We must, kind of democratize that interoperability. Imagine the internet without, open interoperability. So any new market always starts kind of with this lock and play, and then it expands. So we've seen a definite shift even from when we launched EdgeX, where it was like a lot of folks were like, oh, I got it all figured out, and now they're like, yeah, this is painful. We need to band together. But that's just the beginning. And then LF Edge, more broadly speaking, is how do we drive more value for the basics, so we can focus on the real stuff. So it's cool. So the latest release at Edinburgh, which was about a month ago, we're on a every 6-month release cadence, and so one of the keys for all the adoption of EdgeX now is that we've been predictable. We dropped the prototype code back in April 17. We've since replaced it all, like I mentioned. The technical steering committee is got the vendor neutral governance. That's why it's so important that we put it into Linux Foundation, and it's driven by a vendor neutral TSC. And we've kind of shown that we're consistent. We're releasing every 6 months. The Edinburgh release had kind of the latest and greatest in terms of evolving security and management features. Now we've got like the last bits of these SDKs coming together and make it very easy to have plug-in. Key to understand about EdgeX, it's open source. Most important is this API that's developed in the middle. You can replace any of the reference stuff with commercial value add. So think of it doing for IoT in a way. It's not the same because it's not an OS, it's middleware, but do for IoT what Android did for mobile. Create an ecosystem. The X in the name becomes a certification mark over time. So you can create plug-in value add and sell it, make money, provide value around that open API. So this is another key thing. There's a lot of great open source out there. EdgeX is unique in the sense the way it was architected, this whole notion of cloud native, but also it was architected to build an ecosystem around that open API. Very, very different. And that's why it's getting a lot of traction, because it's enabling people to go focus on value and plug it in. So Edinburgh release is kind of like the 1.0, and we're also starting to see commercial offers in the market, like kind of Red Hat models being built up around it. People plugging in, you can create sensor connectivity that you sell. Legacy industrial equipment, it's very hard to talk. A lot of them are like bespoke proprietary protocols. If you reverse engineer that and there's value in doing that, you can sell it. If there's not value in anything in this world, this whole point of open source is to make it, make it ubiquitous when it's not valuable to do it. Undifferentiated heavy lifting, I think I heard someone say one time, is don't do undifferentiated heavy lifting. But north side connectors, plugging into all the different cloud applications, security tools, management tools. This is what it's all about, bringing that stuff together, analytics, you name it.
So when you're talking about the growing ecosystem, I'm more interested in the community around EdgeX Foundry. Talk about that,
Yeah, the community. So, we've gone from, contributing, it was mostly a Dell thing, and then we brought more and more people in. It's grown. I think there's about 100 unique contributors right now. We're looking at, I guess, depending on the month, it seems it's anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 downloads a month. So a lot of contributions happening. It's growing quite quickly. The university project spinning up around it. Like a whole efforts. We're in the research arena spinning up around it, and then of course these liaisons with some of the different orgs out there. We've seen some test beds pop up within the Industrial Internet Consortium. Even some of the other LF Edge projects, like Home Edge, Project Eve, they're using EdgeX as kind of like a reference interoperability layer on top, the application layer on top of their infrastructure focus, as an option. So that community, it's certainly there's contributors, there's just downloads. We hear, it seems like almost every week, about a new deployment, or kind of we're getting out of the POC phase into production. It was like there was an ice cream factory in Sri Lanka that we heard about like about a couple months ago that was using it. We were at a conference about 2 months ago, and this retail outfit out of Mexico comes up. It's like, we love it. We've been using it for months. I'm like, yeah, we don't even know where it's going in many cases, as a community, but it's just growing, quickly, and people are realizing that we need that base that then we can build the value out on top. So now we're getting into that kind of, the commercial phase, and now that it's 1.0, we're now starting up a series of hackathons. We had kind of wanted to wait till we got that stable base. So this next big wave is we've created this thing in the community called the EdgeX Open, kind of a playoff, obviously, the open thing, and it's a hackathon series that will franchise across the globe, starting October 7th and 8th in Chicago, on retail. And so EdgeX can be used in any use case, retail, industrial, home. That crossover that I mentioned is so important between these industries, having those kind of open ability to cross between systems. But retail is an industry that's I think really ripe for change. A lot of disruption happening in that space, especially brick and mortar versus web and online. We worked with a variety of folks. Intel led this effort called the Open Retail Initiative last year. So we picked retail as the first EdgeX hackathon because of a number of reasons. Sponsored by ORI, Open Retail Initiative, the Retail Industry Leaders Association, the trade group. These hackathons are like, take the EdgeX framework, that's like the unifying layer. Here's 3 use cases plus a wild card. Sponsor content, from folks that are providing, hardware or other software, analytics tools, whatever. Use that with EdgeX, and then the winner of the EdgeX Open, there's cash prizes, there's all this stuff. Stuff you can find online, but then we'll do it, retail first, but then we're looking at manufacturing and smart cities and you name it, transportation, oil and gas. It's all about that end user value and the outcomes ultimately, but this is that enabling stuff. So it'll be fun series. So just kind of see more of these and keep working in LF Edge to kind of tie stuff together.
So EdgeX came from Dell, but how diverse is the community? Is there other companies also involved, or just Dell?
No, there's I mentioned 100 unique contributors. There's probably thousands of different organizations. I couldn't even begin to tell you, but and then of course, HP's been a great partner in it. So if anyone's like, oh, this is a Dell project, look at it. You got people from Intel and ARM. Go look online. There's people posting stuff from Huawei and HP and a bunch of companies. Literally, AWS was part of a blog series, recently, a Momentum blog that said, hey, this is good stuff. So for AWS IoT, we're working with them. IBM has been really involved, doing really cool stuff. Canonical, it's just a bunch of different companies for a while. Intel's been a great partner, and of course, but this is about banding together, companies large to small, and solve the basics so we can scale to the big potential over time.
Just the typical open source story, where all the competitors come together to work on the code while they compete in the market. That's how it works.
You gotta. Open always drives a bigger stage for a better show.
What value, as you mentioned earlier, the LF umbrella has so many different projects. So, and whether it's IoT or machine learning, everything is touching each other. An edge device without. So there's a lot of cross-pollination also happens.
Right.
So what is the benefit that project gets by being part of Linux Foundation?
Well, the big thing for LF, they have such a big support system for running a project. There's a bunch of models where you can certainly open source stuff yourself, host it on your own GitHub, whatever. There's other communities where it's neutral because it goes through a certain body, but it doesn't have the governance the same way. So the key thing with Linux Foundation is that the support system, with all of the legal and marketing and all that, but they've got a very good structure for the technical governance, and so when you go and you have to the funding and all that someone's got to pay for the overhead and whatnot, and that's why you pay it in to be on the board or as a supporting member or whatever, but. If you want to drive a project that drives scale across an industry, and that includes competitors. You must have very solid vendor neutral governance. That transparency, all Linux Foundation meetings are run in the open. There's other efforts out there that they're open, but there's a bunch of kind of behind the scenes stuff happening. Very, very transparent, very vendor neutral. They got it down to a machine, Linux Foundation does. And so that's why we picked, as Dell, why we seeded EdgeX into Linux Foundation, why we thought it was a really good idea to kind of bring together this LF Edge umbrella. It's really around the process that provides necessary transparency, which is especially important. It's important for open source, period, transparency. It's especially important when you're trying to drive interoperability, when you're trying to drive scalability, because people won't use it if they don't trust it.
That's true. Yeah, that's true. Thank you, Jason, for talking to me today and explaining in detail EdgeX Foundry. And I look forward to seeing you again by the time next release is out.
Yeah, it's been great talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you.